told us it's just turned 2 o'clock. Welcome everybody to the Economy and Infrastructure CDC. I'd like to welcome again. I know Paul Ralph has been to a few of our meetings. Gail Evans is here as well, and I see Jonathan Wills. And when I seen his face, I thought this isn't planning. But we normally have another officer. But welcome anyway, Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes.
On the straight and narrow, as it were.
That's it. Scott's on leave, so I'm filling him for him today.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Right. Item 1 is apologies for absence.
Don't have any apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Then disclosures of personal or prejudicial interests. Nobody. And then to approve and sign the minutes of the previous meetings as a correct record, pages 1 to 4. So I'll go through the pages. Page 1, page 2, page 3, and page 4. Somebody move there be a correct record.
I move, Chair.
Wendy, before you move, Wendy.
No, move. I was going to move.
Oh, I thought you were going to say there was a mistake then. And,
No.
Right, Wendy's moved. Mike a second. Are we all happy with them? Thank you very much. And then we'll go on to item 4, which is the Tower Riverside and levelling up. We're having a presentation from Gail, but I don't know, are you going to kick it off, Paul, first, or do you want Gail to come straight in?
I think Gail's going to kick off and I'll jump
you'll come back as a backup.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Gail, on to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this follows on from an update report to members that on the Tower Riverside strategy that we brought forward towards the end of December. So as you mentioned there, we've got Paul Ralph, Head of External Funding, and myself on the call just to run through the report. We've got a bit of a sort of a short slide share to accompany the report. If I can just take a moment to bring that up on the screen. Okay. As everyone can see that it's okay there. So it's just largely focusing on a few sort of images and plans and so forth. So if I can just start with a short recap, just as an introduction section to the report, which I'm sure you'll have taken a look at. So Tower Riverside strategy. As the plans show, Tower Riverside area is part of the Lower Swansea Valley to the east of the city centre. The key elements up on the screen there, you can see the plan on the right. So the key elements are the Havard Morver Copperworks site and the Tower and the St Thomas Station waterfront site to the south, and on all the areas in between on the east and the west banks. So as I said, we brought a report to you in December, and that set out the policy context for the regeneration of this area and provided a context of the ongoing progress with development and regeneration, working with partners such as Urban Splash and developers such as Skyline and Penderyn. And if you recall, we also reflected on the previous work on the draft Tower Riverside strategy prepared in around 2018. And a number of projects in that draft strategy have progressed into becoming part of the levelling up funding bid. So the focus for the report and the focus for today's run through of this presentation is to provide some further information on that successful funding bid. So at this point, if I can hand over to Paul, who will take you through the projects there.
Yeah, thanks, Gail. So, yes, it's good news. I think we were saying in the last meeting that it was either going to be a 10-year protracted development, or if we got the levelling up funding secured, then we'd be able to move more quickly. But thankfully, we did get a positive on the levelling up bid. So there are 3 main components of the levelling up project, and the graphic there is showing some of those different components. So the first project is consolidation of the remaining structures that are yet to be worked on at Havard Copperworks itself. The key one is the laboratory building. That's possibly the most beautiful building on the site and the biggest remaining project to be done, and that'll be first off the blocks. There's also then further consolidation of the engine houses. They've got their roofs back and they've got their windows, but it's how you then move them on to the next stage, and that will also involve liaison with Urban Splash as well as to the configuration of buildings around that. The rolling mill, release of parts of that building from storage, because that will be accommodated at Swansea Museum with the refurbishment there, as well as then the V&S locomotive shed as a heritage attraction. There's some pictures there of the laboratory Gail is showing there. So this, as it stands at the moment, the current planning approval for the building and listed building consent is for a broad leisure use. It's currently, the drawings show how it could operate as a 60 cover restaurant, but it could be anything appropriate within that broad planning category to complement what's your Penderyn already on site right in front of that building, and how the site will develop in future. Gail, if you move on to the engine house images, so there's some early concepts there of what link buildings could look like. If you think back to the context of the engine houses when they were operational structures back in their heyday, utilitarian structures that were there to house engines, and they were hidden inside long mills, so you wouldn't have actually seen much other than the roof if you were in a helicopter. So it's trying to create something now that maybe brings some of that back, but also then is protecting and creating further space around the buildings for extra covers to make viable business, but also the Musgrave engine house, the intact engine within that building, that the rolls that sit outside the building currently exposed to the elements, the big rolling wheel and the rest, are protected, and they can be refurbished then in the context of a new structure, which will prevent further deterioration of those structures and enable them to be celebrated. The V&S locomotive shed is the next one there, which again, I think we're not trying to pretend it be anything other than a heritage attraction. The plan is to put some track back with it, and then the locomotives, possibly the locomotives that are currently sitting outside the museum store, the rolling mill, could be accommodated in there and refurbished in that building, for example. Plus, I think there's at least one example of the locomotive that used to be in that engine shed. It's a long and narrow shed to accommodate a very specific design, the Bayer Garrett locomotive. There is one of those still in existence in England, which could be put on display there and operated, for example. The second part of the project then, which is further pontoon activity. So we're looking at we've got the pontoon already planned in front of the engine houses. So we'll be looking at further pontoon towards the Bascule Bridge to complement that when it's reinstated, and then also down towards High Street at a location down there. So you've got then 3 connection points along the side of the Towie, as well as then being able to go into Swansea Marina. So the Copperjack would have 3 stopping off points along the Towie, plus, say for example, you wanted to get off a train at High Street Station, you're a 10-minute walk to the first pontoon in the middle there. You could go to the marina or to the Copperworks and the stadium. So it's opening up that river corridor quite significantly. And then to complement that, the work on the Strand tunnels, it's kind of evoking what happened anyway when there were more arches, as you will recall in the past, and those of you on Facebook you'll see the pictures coming through all the time of the various arches and the numerous micro businesses that used to populate those arches. And that does happen in other cities around the country even now. So it's making those spaces available for micro business, better lighting, making them safe, making them a place to go to rather than avoid, and easing the access, particularly bearing in mind you've got 7 lots of student accommodation centering on that location now. You potentially got the footfall from the station. You've got all the positive developments with coastal housing on High Street itself, and some of the work they're looking at started to face towards the Strand. There's a huge amount of footfall beginning to evolve in this area, so having some facilities there, which could be retail, it could be other things. It doesn't have to be pure retail, but it's making those spaces available for micro businesses to operate in, and easing access from the Strand up to High Street and to the river. And then the third component then, which would be the next one, Gail, I think, is Swansea Museum itself. So some sensitive extension of that building. There's some early concepts there which still have to be worked through. But the key thing with this is enabling, firstly, more exhibition space, so that a lot of the things that currently stored at the museum stores in the rolling mill at the copper works can actually be on display, but also that there's more storage at the museum itself, so that exhibits can be more easily rotated to help Barry there with that. So instead of things being permanently stored, they're actually going to be on display, and those are the three components of the project. And the narrative that bound it all is the Vivian legacy, which arguably, on the one hand, you've got the global trade and everything else, but then also the negatives of the contamination, etc., which hopefully now are being made into a positive. So those were the three components. I think that covers that side of it, Gail.
Yeah, did you want to say anything on sort of the programme, Paul? I just put the programme up there really, and in terms of work moving ahead and timescales.
So it's a significant programme. The most ready part of the scheme is the laboratory, as I mentioned. So we'd be looking to move all components of the programme at the same time, which you'll have seen adverts for additional posts. Where we need additional project managers to move the programme along. We're looking at the quickest and most efficient routes to get all components of the scheme procured, designs completed where necessary, planning LBC, and getting the scheme delivered. The deadline is quite tight, with March 2025 as the deadline for expending the grant, but there is council match involved, so it will be able to go beyond that date. But we'll be looking to get as much of the programme delivered in that timescale as possible, and using the experience we've gained from the existing work on the engine houses and the powerhouse on the Penderyn scheme. There's the existing pontoon, so we're not starting from scratch with this. All of that learning, things like sourcing Colford brick, for example, to replace ash brick that has deteriorated, for example. All that sort of learning has been done over the past 5 years, so we'll be hitting the ground running with this programme. It's a big programme, but the experience is there now to deliver it successfully.
Okay, thanks, Paul. I just wonder if I could sort of also come in just to update in terms of the wider programme and ongoing priorities with regard to the Harvard Morva site. So in terms of the skyline proposals, obviously the park and ride and the area around Harvard will be the main arrival point for the skyline scheme. Further work is progressing well. Our development partners, Urban Splash and Skyline, are coordinating master planning objectives just to make sure that the overall site meets strategic planning and sort of placemaking needs. And we're expecting a Skyline planning application later this year. And there will be a number of public engagement sessions leading up to that. In addition to that, we've got work on site with the river pontoons at Harvard Morva Copper Works. This should be starting on site in the summer, so that's going to greatly open up the water space to activity. We could potentially have the Copper Jack dropping visitors off, taking the trip up from the city centre to Harvard Morva Copper Works. And just to add to that, there is, I know it was a focus of interest when we last spoke before December, was the feasibility work with regard to the West Riverside Walkway. So that's started on site. They're looking at potentially replacing those or actually installing those missing sections of Riverside Walkway along the west side of the river near Morva Road. And this is an important action to create a direct walking route to the city centre from communities along the riverside on Morva Road on Harvard, and also creating that direct link for pedestrians and cyclists between the city centre and the river. And just to add as well, there's also lots of ongoing work to develop a series of walking trails and leaflets to raise awareness of the area's significant local heritage and biodiversity, and encourage community use and more visitors into the area generally. So Just to sort of wrap up, really, I think there's a lot of work to be done, a lot of work going forward. The Levelling Up Fund will be a significant boost to kickstart the next phases of regeneration along the river corridor. And for these schemes, resources will need to be allocated to work up designs and feasibility. And there are substantial areas of work here with as Paul was suggesting, a programme end date of December 25. An Urban Splash will be able to help and support this work going forward. And no doubt levelling up projects will be catalysts for further initiatives. And there were a number of other further projects identified in our previous Tower Riverside strategy that can be explored further. And perhaps we can come back in a further report to the Corporate Delivery Committee in due course on this. And that's the end of the slide share. Can we take any questions? Councillor White.
I got Mike White first. Mike?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, guys, thanks very much. Can I take you to page 8 of your report in section 3, Mover Road Generation Area and Riverside Walkway? Have there been any further progress made in regarding to where the former Swansea components factory is? Because, as you know, there's an area there which is not passable at the moment, which is the actually stopping the link from lower down the river walkway up towards the copper works. And secondly, in regards to the area of the river bank and that area, but what can be done there? You know, obviously, with, as I say, nature trail walks or whatever. Has there been any? Are you intending, when in part of your consultation, plus going out to the local schools, who obviously have shown a lot of interest in the Harvard Cop works, so we can get some feedback of the schools with what the children would be perhaps hoping to have on that area of the opposite the Harvard Cop works there.
Yes, Councillor, I can certainly respond in terms of the West Riverside Walk, having had a recent update from our engineers on this. As I mentioned, there's some site investigation and feasibility work going on this at the moment. They're looking at a number of options that will not involve the use of Swansea Industrial Components land. So yes, as I say, a couple of design options to be worked up, and the starting point is really doing some site investigations, as I mentioned. So there's been a pontoon there down the river you might have seen recently. There's a timescale for taking this forward, and there's also some funding, at least in part, to deliver it. So, as I say, looking towards further feasibility studies and designs, and potentially a planning submission late spring next year, I believe, and tenders next year, and construction towards the end of 24. So there's a broad time scale being suggested there, with funding using some Section 106 money from previous planning applications, and potentially also from active travel grant funding. So yes, they're working on that at the moment.
Can I come back there, Chief? I mean, you just mentioned 106 funding. That's clearly from the student developments there. I'd be very interested on, and I'm sure my ward colleague would, Councillor Bev Hopkins, on exactly what funds that we're looking at there, because there are issues within that area of the Mover Road, especially when it comes off New Cut Road. So there are issues that would have to be addressed there, I think, if there was if there was 106 funding put in alongside those applications. So
Okay.
I'd be very interested to find out exactly what as to what the 106 funding is still there in place.
Okay, well, perhaps we can report back on that in a little bit more detail in due course. As I say, you know, there are some draft designs being worked up at the moment, but as I say, maybe it's something that we can come back and review when further information is available.
Yeah, because if you notice, then yours were twitching once you mentioned 106.
Yes,
Because
yes,
more
Chair.
than likely you'll find out that 3 different departments have already spent the same amount of money. Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Rice.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to first say congratulations, and Paul and Gail and the team must be worth their weight in gold, because to get those bids in and to get them successful, it will really have a transformational impact on the area in some respects, because we've got such a strong heritage there in terms of the Industrial Revolution and copper. We're almost becoming a South Wales version of Telford or Ironbridge, which I think is a really good thing to do. I've got a couple of quick questions about that and the wider plans for the project. I see obviously quite a lot of it is designed as commercial space. Do you have any sort of ideas or any projections at the moment of potential revenue into the council from those buildings?
I think, Paul, you probably want to take that one.
Yeah, part of the application, it was a very thorough application process, and those figures had to be worked through. So that detail is available. Perhaps we can report separately on that or respond in writing, because quite a lot of detail went into the bids on working out. I mean, parts of it are pure heritage, it must be said, but the commercial elements as well, because of the subsidy control regime, that is being reanalyzed at the moment as well, as to the impact and how much subsidy versus the return, that kind of thing. So yeah, we can certainly report back in detail on that, no problem.
Just to quickly follow on from that one, obviously a main part of the scheme going forward after levelling up bid sections of it is the idea of skyline and illusion and the things that you Gail touched on earlier. I see in the capital programme for the next 5 years is about £8 million of expenditure going in against the skyline. So is that monies which is coming directly from the council, or is it monies which has been allocated in funding via UK or Welsh Government? Because 8 million is quite a lot of seed corn for what obviously is going to be quite a large project, and I presume it would be into the tens of millions to be able to pull off.
Yeah, all I can say, Councillor Rice, it's a mixture of funding that will be supporting the Skyline scheme. Obviously, they're a major private sector investor. It's largely their money that will be going to support that, and the council has a funding strategy to contribute towards that.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I mean, from just sorry, my last part to come into there, just to find out. Sorry, Chair, is I'm always keen to obviously try and support private business where we can, and I always think it's great when you see that coming from UK or Welsh national government. It's just a little bit more difficult when it's on a very local basis that we're supporting a private enterprise. So I just wanted to sort of work out how that would be funded, or what's the expected return, or anything like that from that kind of investment from our side.
I'm not sure whether we should be going into the detailed funding, but we can certainly talk about that perhaps outside of the meeting if that's helpful. We can provide a little bit more background.
Sorry, Gail. Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing, Councillor, that there are still some commercial issues which we wouldn't want to obviously discuss in a meeting like this. So that's something I think for a session either later, or a private session. But obviously there are still some commercially confidential issues with the company. So yeah,
thanks, Phil.
Yeah, thanks for that. And maybe Stuart, you could ask a similar question when we come to the medium-term financial plan. See what response you get from that, which will be the same as Mr. Holmes just said, more than likely. Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask, I believe that the Swansea Museum has had storage facilities in the area in recent years, and I was wondering how these projects are going to impact upon the storage facilities that they currently have, and will they be moving their material elsewhere? And is there any possibility that this funding could be used to bring some of the that is currently out of public view back into the public domain? Because I've recently been asked about items of railway railway engines, I believe, that are stored at the site that haven't been seen for a number of years. And is that the sort of thing that might be brought back into public use? Or thanks.
Yeah, Chair, if I could come in. Yeah, there's so the plan for the extension at Swansea Museum is to enable storage that's currently at the Copperworks to be transferred to the museum itself. So there'd be extra wings added sensitively, which would mean you've got both more storage and more exhibition space. So because there are treasures there that aren't being seen. And then I guess things like the V&S locomotive shed would provide the ideal venue to take locomotives inside and work on them. It does need people to come forward to want to do that work, and there would be further grant bidding needed to obviously get, because obviously refurbishing, you think the Tornado was £1 million new build, wasn't it? So it's not cheap doing that, but there would be a space there for groups then maybe to come in and be doing that type of work on site, even as an attraction in itself.
Yeah, maybe Ryland was a little bit late because you'd already touched on that particular point in your presentation. I know since Ryland asked the question, you've gone a little bit deeper, which is always welcomed. Thank you for that. Any more questions? Ryland and Stuart, got your hands up.
Oh, Chair, could I, one of Councillor White's questions as well was about school input into the walking trails, for example. The 4 trails we've currently got, they were led by Friends of Havermore, working with Friends of White Rock and Morriston Park as well. And those groups were working with the schools in the generation of those materials. And they're very popular with the schools. So there is an opportunity to work with those groups. They can bid under their own steam, pardon the pun, for further funding to develop further versions of those trails, which could include nature trails, working with the likes of Deb and others. And they're really keen to. And we've also got each year we're having student placements from Swansea University attached to my team. So when we have those placements, they're working on that kind of thing as well. So yeah, we are actively looking at that.
Yeah, good. Yeah, Stuart, just kept your hand up, so good.
Yeah, thank you. One of the aspects I didn't just mention earlier, but I'm very pleased to see, is about the museum and about how it's going to get some additional investment and an extension. And I'm really looking forward to that. From what I understand is that the new extension will be allowing, as Professor Doyle was saying, more of the exhibits to go on show. And importantly as well, it will allow touring exhibits because it will improve the security of the building. Is that correct? Or I think from what I understand, or it will allow for higher value visits, visiting exhibits to come through. I think it's all brilliant, and I think well done, guys, for getting that money in. One of the things I really hope any renovation that's done there doesn't lose the charm and the magic of the old building, because it's basically one of the only museums as of its ilk and nature left. And as my 7-year-old little boy says to me, and my 4-year-old when we go there, it's like going to the night at the museum. They absolutely love it. So, you know, and I think it's one of the charms of the place. But I'm really happy to see you investing in that as well with the levelling up bid.
Perhaps Councillor Rice, I guess we're working very closely with Tracy McNulty's team on that, and that is part of it really. Things like the library, and there's some beautiful features in the building already that can be accentuated, and you see from the initial concept as well, it's going with the grain of what's there, and that's fundamental, because oldest museum in Wales, it's can you dare say a proper museum, isn't it? But it needs more space. It needs more. There's photographs and paintings and all sorts that are currently locked away, which Barry'd have more scope to be cycling out into view more often, and they can having the items on site means you're not transporting them, because obviously that has an impact on staffing and maintaining 2 locations and all. So it should help refine the approach the museum can take to exhibitions and everything. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, thanks everybody for the questions and the answers and the presentation, which was very good. Phil, do you want to say anything before I sum up?
Just to sort of echo what's been said, really, I think it's a huge achievement for Swansea. We we pride ourselves on our location in terms of a waterfront setting, and you know, we often just think of the ocean and the beach there, but this project really does revitalise the river corridor and make that connection down to the sea, and you know, celebrating the rich cultural heritage that we've got. I think it's a fantastic project, and you know, congratulations to everyone involved, really. And you know, as I've said, I'm looking forward to seeing some of these things come to fruition myself. So
yeah,
thanks.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, it is a bit exciting because we started this as a PDC many years ago when we went down the river in the Copperjack, and we were looking at how we move forward. And I think one of the two things we pointed out that time was pontoons, and that's nearly completed, and the Bascule Bridge, which was because the Copperjack could only go so far. So we're improving all the time, and this is a tremendous tourist attraction for Swansea, not just for the people in Swansea, but to bring tourism into Swansea. What it is, our remit we had when we set the work plan up at the beginning was a new strategy. You've mentioned the strategy that we brought forward in 2019, but wasn't adopted. So do we revisit that? I'm looking for advice now of either Paul or Phil. Do we revisit the strategy with a view of taking forward a new strategy for the next few years? And it's a case of where do we go from now? It seems that the work we've got ready to do is fantastic with a lot of money, and it'll take a while. But then we got to look to the future again, and where do we go? So, is it right that we now look at a new strategy to put to the cabinet member and to cabinet and get this one adopted?
Gail, were we talking about an action plan approach, wasn't it? So, based on what we've done to date, and then there's some clearly defined actions. It's less hypothetical now, isn't it? So there's clear...
Yeah, indeed. I mean, we had a schedule which formed part of an appendix to the report that we brought forward in December, and I think it largely points towards myself and Paul perhaps going through that list and having a really close look at, you know, what within that is already covered from our levelling up funding, and what else that we can target for going forward in terms of priorities. And, you know, maybe that's, you know, some additional bridges or linkages or improvements to linkages to communities and so on. We can certainly go through that and really have a close look, as I said, what are deliverable opportunities in that context, and bring it forward more like an action plan than a strategy. So it's more sort of understanding viability, next steps, progress, programming, and funding, as I say. Is that something that you would support?
Well, yes, you know, I think people say, what's a strategy, what's an action plan, and what's a policy? I think the answer to that is, well, as long as we're moving forward, it doesn't matter what you call it. As long as there is a plan for us to move forward. Mike?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, in regards to obviously getting access from one side of the river to the other side, you know, and to build perhaps is the possibilities that we could perhaps build in a sort of a footbridge over, or a link bridge to so that we can make they can obviously connect both sides.
Yeah, certainly. I think that would be an excellent aspiration for linking Havard Morver Copper Works to White Rock, and creating a circular walk perhaps around the river basin, connecting these different attractors at Havard Morver Copper Works back down to the city centre. Taking a walk and understanding the heritage links, the biodiversity and the key features and areas of interest that will come out of these new developments that we're seeing at these key strategic sites at the north and south of the riverside.
Yeah, it could be on like Venice, couldn't we?
Yeah, I think it is. I think we've spoken before, Gail, about linking up both sides of the river to make like a circular route for walking, cycling, and anything else. But I think at the moment it'll be great to have in an action plan the cost of a bridge putting in. You know, we're not talking pennies. We're talking about Paul Ralph getting his magic wand out again and getting the money we need. Yeah, so yeah, there is a recommendation to the report, and that's that we note the report, and yeah, I'll agree. We note it's an excellent report, and it is the way forward. And then we've discussed relevant next steps, and so I think the next is the action plan. So obviously we'll wait until we go into the new year, because we don't know what we may have the same committee, may not have the same committee, we don't know. And then we'll put something in our work plan to reflect that. But thank you very much. It's been excellent. And this is, I'm not going to say it's the most exciting part of Swansea that's being developed, otherwise the leader will shout at me. So anyway, thank you very much for that, everybody. Excellent. So that's the end of that presentation. No more hands up, so everybody's had the questions asked. So the next thing is the work plan.
Chair, I'd support on what you said there, the most important part of the city.
I only said it because you were here, Mike. No other reason. It worked anyway. So like in March, we got introduction of the Swansea Bay strategy. Are we going to have this, Phil, on our next meeting? Are we nearly finalising that report?
I'm hoping you will get that, Chair, from Jeff Bacon and his colleagues. Yes.
Yeah, we'll have a chat about it before anyway. You know, just to see where we are and make sure it's in. So anyway, and that's it. If nobody got anything else, thanks everybody.
Chair, pardon, sorry to interrupt. Can I just mention the special meeting next
Thursday,
Thursday, 3 p.m?
And I've got it written down here too. You're all aware we got a special meeting on the 2nd of March. It will go into camera straight away, as we've been asked by BID that this stays confidential at this moment in time. So, and we do want the presentation before it goes live. So that's on the 2nd of March, and we got council after it anyway, so one will slip into the other. Nothing else, no, Sam?
No, that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, again, thanks everybody for attending today. We'll see you on the 2nd of March. Except not Gail, not Paul. Thank you very much.